Okay, yeah, so everything's good. All right, so thank you. Hello, Sarai. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for coming in today. I'm sorry that we had to troubleshoot for a little bit, but here we are. So tell me, let's get started with the basics. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are today?
Yeah, totally. So I guess just to get started, I know it might already say in little description, but my name is Sarai. I'm a senior curriculum developer here at Codecademy, mostly working on computer science and some cybersecurity content. So I have to admit, if you'd asked me like when I was in college or high school, I would not have known a job like this existed. So it definitely took a little bit to get here. But I think it can definitely somewhat be traced back to in college. I started doing some TAing and teaching and taking some computer science. And then like along the way, I guess people just sort of saw me as the teacher slash computer science person. And out of college, I actually started teaching. I was a computer science teacher at a K-8 private school here in California. And it was a lot of fun, but I have to admit, after 3 years, there's a mix of various things you might hear teachers complain about. So I eventually decided to look for something else that was still had some aspect of teaching, but then still, again, had some computer science. So I ended up at Udacity, where I was a curriculum manager, which is pretty similar to what I do now, where I worked with instructors to just create good courses. And then after a little while, I moved on here to Codecademy, where again, I'm working with content contributors to just create really good content.
Wow, so sounds like you've been doing teaching for a long time. You have a
Yeah.
lot of background in it, and you definitely know what you're doing. I'm actually curious to know what made you go into science or into programming in particular? Like, you could have gone anywhere, could have done
Yeah.
anything. Why coding? Why programming?
So I think for me, I find this kind of funny. So in high school and even before then, I actually really, really loved math. But I think as we all know, there's not really a lot of jobs that are like mathematician, like you just do math all the time, or at least not that one would think of in high school. But I remember my high school chemistry teacher, he told me, he's like, what has a lot of math I think you would like? Computer science. And I was like, oh, okay, like I guess that sounds kind of cool. And so then it was like my second quarter in college. I was like, you know what, he told me math and computer science kind of go together. I guess I'll go ahead and give it a try. And then I just like fell in love with it from the first class. It sort of just felt like solving puzzles all the
Hmm.
time, which I think is what I really loved about math. And then I guess the rest is kind of history from there.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you like the math is what drove you into computer science, because I know that a lot of our learners online, they always have this question in the back of their heads, said, do I need to be good at math to be a programmer, to be a developer? Like, hey, I like web development. Do I need a math background? I don't have a math background. Do I need it to be successful? And it's interesting that math is what drove you into computer science, because you might draw the conclusion that yes, but I think that the answer is probably a bit more in the middle. So what do you say to people that might come and say, hey, I'm not really good at math, or I don't really have a strong mathematical background? Can I still be a good developer? Can I still get into the industry?
I think that's a really good question because that's actually something I struggled with a little bit when I would teach computer science to kindergarten through eighth graders, is that I knew if I started with a lot of the normal introductory computer science programs that are like build a calculator, they'd be like, oh, okay, I don't like math. And obviously programming must just be math. So I don't like programming because they're super similar. But then when I found like the first projects we did were things like building games and stuff like that, where yes, there is some math involved, but there's so much more than that. I think one thing they share that's similar is this idea that you need to think through things in like a logical, straightforward process and be able to organize your thoughts. And so I think they share that. And now, mind you, there are some areas of computer science, like if you want to be a data scientist, okay, there is going to be a lot of math that will be involved in that. But if you want to do front end engineering and make websites look amazing, there's a lot less math involved in that. And I would say you don't necessarily need to be good at math to do that. So it really depends on the area of computer science you want to go into, because there's some, again, very math heavy, and there's some that really aren't. Like math might be helpful, but strong math background is definitely not required.
It's almost I want to say a bit of a classical view of computer science. I think computer science made back in the 80s, back when the field was very young. Computers were like not as capable. I think there was a lot more emphasis in math and algorithms because there was so much optimization, right? Programmers were working like directly into the hardware, hard coding things. And I feel like at that point, people needed more of a math background because there might just been the necessity to work with the hardware you had. But like you said, if you want to be a front-end developer, guess what? There's a lot more design and UX and like experience and things that you need to know. And like me myself, I'm not good at that. Like I think a lot of our learners find it sometimes frustrating that they're going through or the front-end path or the full stack path of the web development. And they say, hey, I know the building blocks of a website, but if I try to do it myself, I can't, because I look at the blank page like a canvas, like, oh no, like I don't know
Yeah.
where I want to put the buttons. Like I know how to make a button, I don't know where the button should go. Sort of like logic. So it's interesting that a lot of these questions, like, hey, do I have to be good at math? It's like it depends. It depends. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times you have to say it depends. I know that you're working. You mentioned curriculum in cybersecurity. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mhm.
How do you end up there?
Yeah, I think it was kind of interesting because I definitely like I didn't study it in college. In college, I took a lot of the typical computer science algorithms and some natural language processing and stuff like that. But then it was actually when I was working at Udacity, they had me working on a lot of Java content and things like that. But then eventually I started working on some cybersecurity content, and I just realized that I really, really enjoyed it and really loved it. So eventually I just kept working with instructors working on that sort of content. And I just find there's something so engaging and interesting about it. I had someone describe to me before there's like sort of two different reasons cybersecurity is amazing. I think there's one, everyone, or at least some people on the inside, they kind of want to be like a hacker. They want to know how to hack into things. And so learning about
Hmm.
cybersecurity is really cool. But then there's this other side of people who really kind of want to be detectives and they want to figure out what's wrong and fix those things and figure out what went wrong. So again, it was just through building the content and just realizing how cool it was. And so then when I was able to come here and work on more cybersecurity content, it was just an easy choice.
Hmm. Okay. You hit on a lot of things there. There's this kind of view, like you said, like hackers, like, hey, cybersecurity, it's all about hacking into places, breaking things. Um, Oftentimes, people forget about the other definition of hacker, which is a person that kind of like breaks things just to see how they work or to figure
Mhm.
out how they come together. I know that places like Facebook, they like calling their developers hackers because it's kind of like you're building things, you're figuring out how things work on the inside, like at a deeper level, and that's what a
Yeah.
hacker is like traditionally viewed as. So I wonder if when you're working on this curriculum and you're writing these lessons, if you're in the back of your head, you're thinking, well, is the learner going to get like bored with this because it's like too basic? Like, should we spice up a little bit and give some examples like, oh, this is how computers do this, like this is how some flaws are discovered, things like, is there like a sense that there's some expectations that need to be met when somebody, when a learner just says, oh, cybersecurity, yeah, I want to take this course?
I think absolutely. I mean, I know for me, one of the most exciting things, honestly, is just to see kind of like what can go wrong. And sometimes it's interesting to see, like, you can take this tiny piece of code and make something really big happen that, if the developer was smart, the thing won't happen because it's not supposed to. But like if they weren't smart and didn't sanitize their fields or check the user input, like you
Mhm.
can make websites do all sorts of weird stuff they're not supposed to. And so I definitely, as much as I can, when I build content, like I want students to see that because those are the things I find exciting about it. So if I leave it out, like why should I expect the student to find it interesting if I wouldn't find it interesting? So it's trying to find that balance, I think, where like you don't want to, go off the deep end and just have a million fun, cool examples and then you like forgot to actually teach them anything. So it's definitely a little bit that balance.
Nice. It's it's sort of like, yeah, like you said, if it's boring for you, like it's going to be boring for other people too. And
Yeah.
so do you find yourself often thinking about, um, kind of like the professor point of view. Like I know that all content is very self-paced and it's sort of like you against your screen and like completing content and going through lessons. But do you often have to think about this more of like a professor standpoint where you says, okay, I'm delivering this information. What's the best way that I can do this in a way that's going to make the most sense, or a way that's not going to be confusing, or how do I pace it? So like maybe there's some parts of the lesson that are like boring or like heavier on materials. So okay, I'm going to mix some of the lighter stuff with the heavier stuff so the flow is better. How often do you find yourself in that kind of like professor point of view?
Yeah, so I think that's something I think that having taught in real life has really helped me, partially because for some content, I already kind of know how students will react or probably react because I've actually taught it in a classroom before, or actually, I've taught college students a little bit before. For new things, I think what I try to do for things that seem a little more boring or it's like not as exciting is trying to find like a real world scenario to wrap around it, or try to think about like, okay, we're talking about something that doesn't seem exciting, but like when did this happen in the real world so we can bring that in? So either like sort of creating a real world scenario or bringing in something that actually happened, or trying to give like the student something that they can play around with. It definitely is a little bit of a challenge because I can't see the student's direct reaction. So I kind of just have to think a couple steps ahead of this isn't exciting. So which one of these tools will keep them engaged as we work through this maybe a little bit more boring part of the content?
Definitely. It's kind of hard. I guess it's kind of hard to give people a practical experience in cybersecurity because at the beginning, the introduction, like you don't know enough to hack anything, and then even if you get deeper into the concepts, it's still kind of like there's all these professionals out there that are trying to patch things, right? Like you can't just say, oh, go hack your computers. Like, it's not going to work. Like it's like really
Yeah.
involved, like months of preparation and coding this stuff. So if people are going through like the cybersecurity course, like if they decide to pick it up today, are there any like tools out there, like websites or like virtual machines or like, like scenarios that kind of like fake, but they let you practice some of these skills in a controlled environment? Like, how do people practice this?
So I think it varies. There are like some websites I've seen that I think are really cool. One downside I found for some of them, like I think I tried Hack This Site is kind of a fun one. But then sometimes it's like you do need some of that web knowledge, web programming knowledge to really understand how you kind of hack into things. And I find sometimes in between challenges, they just get harder really quickly. So it can be a little bit difficult. Like those are some ways you can go ahead and get some practice. Again, there's like some online content. Like again, like we have some cybersecurity content we're building, and we try to build in little scenarios where you can see what would happen if you hacked into something. It just quick reminder for everyone out there, don't try to hack random sites just for fun. Because if it does work, you could get in a lot of trouble and that could be really bad. So just
Definitely.
remember there are laws around this, as fun as it seems to go hack random things. So definitely, like I said, I'm not remembering some of the other names right now, but like Hack This Site was one of them that I think I first played around with. And there are a few others where they'll give you fun little scenarios where you can go ahead and hack something, and maybe you like put information in the URL, or you have to inspect the web page to go and see something in the HTML. Like there's hidden fields that you can't see on the page, but you can see in the console, for example. And as silly as some of those things seem, like some websites you use every day probably have some of these vulnerabilities. Like you sort of said, like sometimes it might take months and months to be able to actually hack things and or be skilled in cybersecurity. There's a lot of very insecure websites out there. So I'm seeing that more and more the more I learn about cybersecurity, actually. But again, don't actually go out and hack things.
I have a friend that works in security and cybersecurity, and he always tells me it's like it's not a matter of how. I mean, it's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when you're gonna get
Mhm.
hacked. And he said that cybersecurity oftentimes is a race to minimize your. I think he calls him like exposure surfaces or something, like basically saying you just have to
Yeah.
narrow it so much that is like you can get rid of all the holes, but you want to make them as few and as small as possible, that the chances that somebody exploits them are like tending to zero, basically. They tend to zero. So it's kind of an interesting field where it's like there will always be bugs, there will always be ways of breaking into things. It's just that it's kind of like a race between the defender and the attacker, and like how to figure out how to get around each other, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those interesting things where there's new types of malware and things like that that are still sort of, I don't know if being discovered is the right word, but like still happening, where it's you see something like ransomware is becoming more and more popular, but like that's something that hasn't been around forever. So there's lots of new ways of attackers are learning how to hack into things. So it's like you said, it's a race and you just got to hope you can
Mhm.
stay ahead of people, and you won't always stay ahead of people. So you have to make sure if a hack does happen, everything doesn't explode basically.
Okay. Going back to learning and curriculum, I'm curious to know, let's say that someone is going around the internet and they're trying to, you were in Udemy before, so I just thought that would be really interesting to hear your take on when there's so many websites and so many places to learn, and there's so much to learn. I see this in the community all the time where our learners feel very overwhelmed. Like they say, hey, I want to be a web developer. And it turns out that there is HTML and CSS and JavaScript and different versions of them. And there's React and Vue.js and Next.js and Node.js and like Bootstrap and backend. And like they start like all these acronyms and terminology, and they get this bag of things and they think, well, I have to learn all of this and it's huge and it's going to take me forever. So if there's a lot of people that find it very overwhelming to come into something completely new. So how do you see from the perspective of the student, how do you tell someone this is the way, or like this is the way I would go about finding a course that works for me? Like I'm gonna take this weekend to learn something new. How do you go about
Yeah.
discovering the websites of the coursework, or looking at a syllabus and saying this seems to be well put together, or this is going to be a waste of my time? Is there like are there like rule of thumbs for these things?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say, now mind you, this isn't as relevant in interviews, but like once you get a job, a really important thing to know is you will probably have to learn technologies that you didn't already know coming in. So just the ability to learn and learn quickly is super important. Or like, let's say you're really good at like Express or like, React, and then you go to work at a company, do web programming, and they don't use Express and React. They use a different framework and like you have to learn it. So this is something to realize, like, yes, there's some things where you might look at a company and say they use Express. I want to work here. I'm going to go learn Express. But things move really quickly. So just because you've like gone and learned the newest, flashiest thing doesn't mean it'll be relevant later. So I think that's one thing just to be aware of when you're like, where should I get started? Learning the newest, flashiest framework right away isn't necessarily the most useful. Like I would say, if you want to be a web programmer, like learning like vanilla JavaScript, which kind of just means plain JavaScript, and then sort of knowing the basics of that is helpful because a lot of those frameworks are built on that. Or like if you want to go ahead and do something, use cool Python libraries and stuff like that, like you have to know the basics in Python. So first things first, you need to learn the basics. Don't just jump for like the flashy stuff that like you're reading about everywhere else. You have to start with the basics. Um,
Okay.
besides,
So
yeah,
okay, so that's the basics. And do you when you so okay, so the basics, I guess the what you're trying to say is like don't get too caught up in like which technology in particular, like today is React and tomorrow is going to be something else. Like just focus in learning one that seems to be widely used, like something that seems useful, and then it's kind of like I think I heard that before, right? Like it kind of like translates from framework to framework. Like there's like maybe 3 very popular front end frameworks, and they are slightly different, but when you learn one of them, it tends to be very easy to pick up the other ones, right? So
yeah, definitely.
so it's very transferable, I guess, the knowledge. So
Mhm.
how about when you are like the very beginning? How do you say, you know
Yeah,
what, like I've heard learners that will come to the community and say, I like programming in general. I just know I like
yeah,
coding. I like the logical puzzles. Should I be a web developer? Should I be a data analyst? Should I be a data scientist? Should I be something else, a game developer? So what about those people that don't even know which road go down to? Like how would you tell someone how do you explore, or how do you decide where you should go to?
Yeah, I think that can definitely be tricky. I mean, for me, one of my favorite languages to start with is probably Python, because I think you can start doing a lot of fun stuff really quickly, which is great. Like, because there's some languages like Java, which can be really useful, but there's definitely like a lot more to think about, and you don't really get to build interesting stuff as quickly. Or you could learn JavaScript as well, but then if you get into the HTML and CSS, that's definitely more of like, I'd say if you want to build websites, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, like that's where you should start. If you're just more widely interested in programming, I might suggest something like Python, which again, I think you will learn a lot of foundational things, but it's also just a little easier to get started. And also, if you're just getting started and you're not sure, I would say maybe, try something free. Like, for example, yeah, like Codecademy has a lot of introductory stuff for free. But if you want to like really do more advanced stuff later, it is possible that you might have to branch out of free content. I know that's something I've run into in the past where it's like, oh, I want to learn all the things, but I don't want to pay for it. But unfortunately, when this content gets more
Hmm.
advanced, it can be a little more hit or miss if you're not willing to pay for things, which again, in an ideal world, like everything could be, all the good content could be free, but unfortunately it doesn't always work that way. So I think those are just some of my like very basic general guidelines.
Hmm. It's I think the way I think about it sometimes, and I want to know if you agree with this, is there's really no wrong answer, in the sense that whichever programming language you pick first, um, unless it's like a very obscure, very specific, narrow focused
Mhm.
language, any of the like general purpose languages like Python or C++, things like that, uh, even if you end up going a totally different direction and you don't use that, you end up you start with Python and you end up using Java. That wasn't a waste of time. Like, you still learn
Yeah.
the basics, like variables, logic, functions, loops, data structures. Like, you still learn all of that, and now it's just the syntax changed, right? Like, there's really no wrong answer, is there?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Where like my first programming class was in Java, and then my second one was C++, and then I took one in C. But again, like the syntax was so similar that it's really like as long as you know the basic concepts, it's like when you talk about frameworks, like if you know one, it's a lot easier to learn a second. It's like since I already learned Java, it was
Mhm.
a lot easier for me to learn C. And then like later when I decided to like, learn Python and Codecademy, it was almost more like a refresher, even though I didn't know Python, like I knew another programming language already. So the concepts themselves were familiar. So even if you're like, oh no, I started in the wrong programming language, like you can definitely, it's gonna be easier for you to transition to another one because you already know the basic concepts behind it.
Okay. Now I'm going to switch up the question. So the first question was, if people are exploring now, what if is the opposite is true, and they say, well, I'm on the clock, I just lost my job and I'm trying to transition into tech. Always wanted to, and now that I lost my job, I guess it's my time now to go for it. So I can't spend 6 months exploring languages and trying to figure it out. I need to know what's in demand. I need to know what's useful. So is there like a place online, or is there someone, like, how do you say, well, web developers are more in demand than data analysts, or front end better than back end? Like, is there like a way that people can discover if they say, well, I need to know what I need to learn in the next 3 months so I can start transitioning this way? um, is there a way of deciding that? Is it even possible?
I mean, I think there definitely is. I mean, there's a lot of articles that'll tell you all the time, like engineering jobs are growing, and they'll mention specific ones. Like, again, obviously, I work on cybersecurity content, so I know it's like, oh, demand for cybersecurity specialists, you know, going through the roof. But honestly, if you just look at jobs that companies are looking for people for, you'll start to see like what they need, where it's like, do they need a lot of more front end developers? I know like a term we're seeing a lot also is like full stack, which means a little bit of front end and back end. So I think if you look, you can also start to see like, are there certain companies or jobs that sound more interesting to you? And then what are they asking for? Like, are there certain languages that they're asking for? There's also certain places like, Stack Overflow and other things, like they can go and start to tell you like what languages are people looking for, which things are more popular. So It really varies. Then there's also, this interesting thing where, there's some older languages where there's not as many jobs, but like if you know that language, you could potentially get paid a lot more. So
Hmm.
I think it's partially if you look at the jobs that are out there and kind of figure out which ones are the most interesting to you, you can sort of make a list and see what are the technologies these require. And then beyond that, I think you would have to do a little research and see like how long would it take me to learn this? Like if it's like we need someone like a machine learning expert, unfortunately, like that would take you a long time, probably a lot longer if you only have like a month or two or a couple months. So you might need to say, okay, like what are the steps before that or something like that. Like it might be easier to learn front end than to be, like I said, like an expert in like natural language processing or something like that.
Hmm.
So I think that's another thing to think about as well.
And going specifically to cybersecurity, since that's what your focus is now on, um, do you see, I mean, there's a difference between reading articles saying, oh, there's a huge demand for security experts, and then the actual demand for entry-level junior cybersecurity experts. Because and I'm calling them cybersecurity experts because I don't know what their name actually is, right? Like,
There's lots of
I
names
can,
for it.
like, I'm assuming that cybersecurity is a huge field and you can specialize on a variety of things. Maybe infrastructure versus like software security versus like other things. I'm assuming that there's a lot going on,
Yeah.
right? So is there, does that also hold true for the cybersecurity field? Just kind of like web development seems to be a lot in vogue, where people kind of like, they go through a boot camp, 3 months, like 12 weeks seems like an appropriate amount of time for someone to go into a junior role as a front-end developer. Um, does that also hold true for cybersecurity? Do you know if is it possible to break into cybersecurity in like 12, 15 weeks of work?
I mean, I think it obviously depends how many hours. Like, there's a variety of different ways. Like, there are some certifications that you can get. There's also, there are boot camps. There's also like online courses. There's a lot of different things that you can do. But then it also, I think, depends on the company, where it could be something where if it's a large company, they want someone who's like more specialized in a specific area of security. But then I've known like people who work at a smaller company where it's like one person is looking at all of the security stuff. So I think it varies in that sense, like how much you need to know or how specialized you need to be. But like you could hypothetically um, break into, I think, as like a sort of junior level with just a couple months between like certification boot camps and other things like that. I think cybersecurity is also a little unique in that a lot of the people I know doing it, some of them were self-taught on the job, or they were just self-taught on their own because
Hmm.
they liked trying to find vulnerabilities and things. Like one person, he wrote blog posts about cybersecurity for years, and now he works as a, a security engineer somewhere. And you're like,
Nice.
interesting. Or someone, he's like a, cloud architect, and he works with security stuff, and it's just the company needs someone to look at security stuff. He started doing it, and now he's a security guy. So there's a lot of different ways to get into it. So like if you're at a company and they don't have a security person, like it's possible you could become that person. Again, getting hired on as a security person, you will need to go through some sort of training, and whether it's boot camp, certification, or another thing, it could be worthwhile. Like I said, look at companies you're interested in and see like, do they want practical experience or certifications or something else? Because that could also guide
Mhm.
you a little bit.
Okay. Well, we've been talking for a while. I don't know if you realize, like, time flies when you're talking
Yeah.
about cool stuff. And cybersecurity is definitely the cool stuff. I
Yeah.
wanted to give you a chance to maybe, I don't know if you have any final thoughts for learners or people that are watching us online and that maybe they are thinking about taking courses in cybersecurity or maybe like in general courses online. So just give you the floor and I don't know if there's anything you like to share with us.
I mean, I think something to really highlight, especially when you're starting out. I mean, that being said, if you're not on a time crunch, is that, like you said before, there's not really a, I think, wrong place to start. I remember, like I said, in college, I took like a natural language processing class for fun, and it was probably one of the most fun classes I took in college. But I never would have thought like, oh, natural language processing, that sounds so cool and amazing. But I think besides that, it's really just important to think about like, what are your goals and where do you want to get to? and just realizing like if you want to be a more advanced engineer or something like that, like you might need to like pay for more advanced content. Or, you know, if you want to just get in at a junior level, like you might be able to use the free content. Just again, thinking about like where do you want to get to, and like practically like what will you need to do to get there, because there's not always a shortcut, unfortunately.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. Stay motivated and keep keep reminding yourself of the goal. I guess that's kind of like the main point. Is it might take a while. It might take 3 months. It might take 4 or 5 months. But I think people that successfully transition into tech are usually the ones that persevere, and the ones that kind of like keep reminding themselves why they do it, why they are studying so hard. So keep at it, I guess, and get there. And I think we had a question from someone in the chat. Let's see. So a little bit of Q&A. This user said, throughout your experience, what learning style have you noticed most inspiring software engineers find success with?
I'm not sure if this is necessarily defined as a learning style. And again, you're probably tired of this term. I'm going to say it anyways, but like this idea of like that growth mindset, where something I know like would happen a lot in college, I think working on projects, is sometimes you will hit a wall and there'll be bugs and things will be wrong. And sometimes it'll be really hard. And like just remembering like, even though like maybe you're making mistakes and running into bugs and things like that doesn't mean that you are bad at computer science. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. And just remembering that that is all a part of the learning process. So I think just really persevering through that. And also like the first time you get stuck, don't immediately look up the answer. Like try to fix it yourself and really try to work through it as much as you can, because that's what's going to happen in the real world. Again, like there's not going to be just a simple answer that you can go to the back of the textbook and find. So like I said, trying to solve problems on your own as much as you can, and then not giving up the first time you hit that bug. Those are two things that I think are incredibly important.
I think the way I explain to people is that when you think of a problem solver, what it means when somebody says I'm a problem solver, usually what that means is that you have the resilience to go through the frustration of something doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and you open 5 tabs and you have like 10, and then it's like goes to 10 tabs on your browser, and you keep asking for questions and looking through threads on forums and stuff. So I keep telling people, when they say that as a developer, you need to be a problem solver and you need to think logically, it really comes down to that sort of grit of saying, look, there's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm not going to freak out. I'm just going to, if it takes me an hour, it will take me an hour, but I'm just going to start researching this, reading the docs, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this, right?
Yeah, I guess that's maybe another thing too, is practice researching things. Like that's something that will also make your life a lot easier. Again, you won't always find the answer right away, but knowing where to find helpful information, like you said, documentation or which forums are good, like that was something I would teach students, because that is another really important skill.
Yeah, that should be like a skill on its own. It's like, I'm a developer.
Yeah.
Like imagine this, I'm a developer and I'm also a documentation reader. Like I'm good at reading the dry, esoteric documentation.
Yeah, sometimes that's how it goes. Or I'm really good at Googling. Like I'd always teach students, like you Google like the language you're using, the library you're using, and then what you're trying to figure out. Like those 3 pieces of information will usually guide you to something that's about right. So it's, yeah, Googling
Wait,
is
isn't
another
that
skill.
somebody, I feel like some philosopher, somebody famous said something about that, like how the important thing is knowing how to ask the question. At some point in history, somebody said there's always an answer. It just might not be the answer to the question you think it is. Like, so you need to be really good at framing the question so that you get the outcome. Basically, you make the question in a way that the answer that you get is the one you were expecting. There was somebody that basically says like, it's true one way, not the other way. Like there's always answers for everything. Like you find information, but it's about what you were looking for,
Yeah, I think I've heard that. I'm not sure who said it, but
Yeah.
It's definitely true. Like sometimes just changing like one word in your query will answer your question. And again, like one word wrong and you'll end up with all these results that actually have nothing to do with what you're looking for.
Nice. Okay, well, I don't see any other Q&A in the chat. So like I said, for our viewers, if you have any questions, please type it up in the chat and we'll read through them. But otherwise, I think that we're done here. It's been awesome.
Yeah, fun.
It's been awesome talking to you. I learned so much today.
Yeah, no, this is great. It's always fun to chat about, cool learning and computer science stuff.
Always. I love it too. Okay, well, so thank you everybody for stopping by today. And thank you to you, Sarai, for talking to me today, taking the time. I think our learners are going to really appreciate the information you share with us. And I guess I'll see all of you live next week, same place.
All right, bye everybody.
Okay. I ended.